Okay, welcome everybody. So I'm going to show you a few things today. Um, this is Module 3 for Cloud Management. And I'm going to show you the command line interfaces that can be used on the cloud provider side. So allow me to kind of clarify what I mean by that. We have been working with the command line interface with Linux, and so the command line interface for Linux allows us to interact with a specific container or specific virtual machine that we create. Okay? That being said, sometimes we don't want to use the graphical interface to interact with the cloud provider themselves. So, for example, as you can see on my screen, the AWS account. Okay, where's that? Right here, the console. Okay, this is how you've learned to create a basic virtual machine so far. Okay? Now, most of you are going to use this console, or if we talk about the Google console, this one here, you're going to use this to manage your projects. But you don't have to use this interface. There are a couple of other ways to manage your cloud resources. And so the one that we're going to talk about today is using the native command line tools that Google and Amazon provide to us. So we can perform the same thing we can get by clicking around in the graphical interface using their API and a command line utility that makes use of that API. If you remember back to Module 1, an API is an application programming interface. There's a third way that we haven't talked about yet, and we will talk about later in this course, and that's using an automation tool, which again uses the same basic concept of an API, but provides an automated mechanism to manage your infrastructure across different cloud providers. But for today, what we're going to focus on is that second option of using the specific vendor's command line tool. So you might ask, why would I want to do such a thing? Well, clicking around a graphical interface takes time. Okay, so if we could potentially streamline it by programmatically using a shell script or just doing things in the command line, we might be able to be more efficient at doing them and doing things in a repetitive manner. But the way we're teaching today is going to be using the specific cloud provider tools. So there will be one for GCP and there will be a different one for AWS. When we talk about the third way with automation later on, that will actually be able to be used by both. Okay, so it will make us even more efficient. Now that being said, the homework for week 2, and week 3 as well, you started it last week, and that was the command line interface for Linux. Okay? There is no homework that has you use the command line interface for the cloud providers. Okay? So if you can't install this tool on your computer, that's okay. I just want you to be aware of its existence. Okay? That being said, you are more than welcome to use it. Until we get to the automation unit, you are welcome to use this tool. When we get to the automation unit, everybody in the class is going to start using the automation tool instead of the graphical interface to do things. And you're also going to use it instead of this command line interface from the cloud providers. Okay? So, let's just start off by showing you a little bit about this particular tool. Oops. Okay, so if I go to the AWS site and I look for the CLI, which I've done here, you can see the website, but I just Googled it. There are references on how to get started. There's a reference of how to use it, and there's a community forum if you get stuck and have issues. Okay. Now you can download it to your specific machine. So in my case, I would download the macOS package, and then I would install it. If you're using Amazon Linux, then you're lucky because the CLI is already installed on that particular machine. You don't have to do anything. So if you do want to explore it, you can use it using the CLI and following the instructions under getting started and the CLI reference to just go ahead and start using it under Amazon Linux. Okay? If you're using a different version of Linux, then what you can do is you can download the installer here and copy it to your server. and then you can install it following the instructions that are provided by Amazon. All right. And so the command line user guide will walk you through how to install and configure the tool. And then once you get it set up, you can actually go in and do things like this first one here, describe the instances that I have in EC2. The second one is I want to start instances, and here's the ID of the instance. So that's the same as you click in the little checkbox and then clicking the start option. And there's a lot of other commands that you can use as well. So you can take a look at this and also at the getting started guide and the command line documentation. So that's the AWS side. So I'll go ahead and get that installing in the background here on this machine. Okay, that's going. Now the second thing I want to show you is Cloud Shell. So Cloud Shell is actually in your GCP console here. This little icon here is Cloud Shell. It's already installed here. And what this allows me to do is I can open this up and it opens a little terminal here, which I can then use to connect to all of my Google instances out there. Okay. And it runs entirely in my web browser. It also has an editor here, so if I don't know VI and I don't know Nano, I can edit files using this editor. Now, this is a little buggy. I've had problems with it, and other students have had problems with it, but it may have been improved since the last time I used it. I do want you to learn as part of this class how to use a command line command line editor. Okay, so you can pick which one you use, either VI or Nano. It's your choice, but please learn one of those. It's going to make your life a lot easier. And we can see that this is the Cloud Shell, and it's already set up for this particular project. I can change to any of these other projects here. So all these are projects, and it just happened to be connected to the MIS 484 one right now. Okay. So then I can type in help, and I can get details about how to do things. So if I want to get G-Cloud help, and I can also get Cloud Shell help. So you can see these are different things that I can do. Now that's the Cloud Shell on Google. There's also the Cloud SDK. That stands for Software Development Kit. What this allows me to do is go ahead and download a command line interface for my actual computer here. Okay. Now, for each OS, whatever I'm running, it tells me what I need to do in order to install it. Okay, so if you're Windows, you would click this button, and if you're Mac, this one. And then depending on the version of Linux that you have, you would click one of these. So the first thing it tells me I have to do is that I have to install Python, or have Python on here. So I run this to see what version I have. I have 2.7.6. Okay. Sorry, 2.7.1.6. And so you can see it supports the versions of Python are 3.5 to 3.7 or 2.7.9 or higher. Python 3 and Python 2 are completely different. And so you may have Python 3 or might have Python 2 in your machine. As long as you have one of these versions or higher, you should be good. Okay. Now, then I download one of these tools. Now, most of us have a 64-bit machine, so we're going to download the 64-bit. It would be very uncommon for you to still have a 32-bit machine. Okay, so same with Windows. Most machines that have been built in the last at least decade, if not longer, have been 64-bit machines. But I can again just download this file, and it now shows up on my computer here. And so I'm going to make my screen a little smaller. It's clearly not how to do it. So I can show you this. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to install this on my machine. Oops. This is going to be my downloads directory. And so I have this file here. So the first thing I have to do is unzip this file. Now once it's unzipped, I have a tar file, which when we talked about the command line, we talked about how tar files are an archive. So I can do a tar and extract that file. And this takes a second. But once I'm done, I now have this directory called Google Cloud SDK. So I can go ahead and switch to that directory. I have an install file, so now I can go ahead and install this. So we're looking, the problem is there's a permission error. Here's the problem. I have a config directory that does not have the right permissions. So in order to change that, and this may not be an issue for you, oops. But I'm going to change ownership on my config directory. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and make this recursive. That's what the capital R is. So now I should be able to go back. Oops. Go back to my downloads folder. So the first question I get asked is whether I want to improve the SDK by collecting usage data. This is your own personal prerogative, okay? And you can read the details and respond to the question appropriately. Okay? So now it's going to go through and ask me if I want to install certain components. I'm just going to select the default. You can read through this and decide on what you want to install and then whether you want it to update your path. I just recommend doing that if you're going to use this. Again, just to make it clear, you are not required to do this. I'm just walking you through it real quick just so you can see how this is done. If you, so basically this is a configuration file, and so it's just asking me which file to update for my shell, and so I just select the default. Now if I exit out of my shell here by doing this and I reopen my terminal, I should have that new file that knows about where the CLI is and stuff. Okay. Now let's go ahead and go back here. So when I'm done here, I can go in here and initialize my shell using this here. Now for the AWS side, I can do the same sort of thing. So I've done the installer, downloaded it, and now I'm in my home directory here under downloads. I should have an AWS installer file somewhere here. Yeah. I have this ALS CLI v2. Okay. So, because I'm on a Mac, I can just double click this. Yep, I already did that. Move to trash. Boom. Now the AWS CLI is installed. So now I can go through this and the reference guides and tutorials, and I can use the AWS command line here to do the exact same thing I could do with Google. I set it up to point to my AWS account, and now I can do anything that I would do in my AWS account here using my command line. Okay, and that's pretty much it. So I will go ahead and stop the video. And if you have any questions, you can bring them to the Q&A session.